Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Can't interrupt Bowie when he's on a roll. It's 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company on a Friday morning in your nation's capital. Thanks for ending your work week with us and launching into the weekend the right way. Here on America's Morning Show. Coming up at 7:05, Eric Shawn, senior correspondent for Fox News, who covered the O.J. Simpson trial, will join us. 7:35, Diana Mayhew, National Cherry Blossom Festival, on this week's final festivities. 8:05, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. He's now stumping for Trump after his ill-fated presidential. I got to say, though, people like joked about Doug Burgum. You know, like, who the hell is this guy? And then he actually was pretty good, I got to say.
From a policy standpoint?
Yeah. I have a hunch that he might have a role in the Trump administration should it occur next year. 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel. I'm Larry O'Connor. That's Patrice Onwuka chiming in here. Good morning, Patrice.
Happy Friday,
yeah.
Larry and everyone out there.
You bet. Happy Friday. I got to tell you, one of the most surreal parts of my life, and I've had a very surreal life, Patrice, but I lived not just in Los Angeles during the O.J. Simpson trial, but I lived and worked in West Los Angeles, where, let me put it in perspective, because everybody's like, where were you on the day that O.J., did the Bronco chase, right? And I don't even want to know where you were, because I'm guessing you were like 6 years old or something.
In 91? Yeah, that's about, no, I was a little bit older. Maybe I wasn't quite 10 yet, but I was getting there.
Great. Well, I was working. It was my old life. I was the manager of the Schubert Theater. Was it 91? No, it was 90. It was 93.
93. Okay, then I hit
93,
10.
94. 93, 94. It was.
I
it was
that,
June of 94. I so vividly.
94,
it was June of 94 because I remember vividly. I was working at the Schubert Theater in Los Angeles, where I was the general manager. We had Sunset Boulevard with Glenn Close. On the Sunday night where the murder took place, I actually drove and met my brother in Las Vegas for a weekend. Weekends in theater is Sunday night to Tuesday afternoon because you have Monday off. And we woke up in Las Vegas with, oh, my God, did you hear O.J. Simpson's wife died? She was murdered in L.A. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I looked at where it was in Brentwood. It's like, oh, my God, I work like a mile from there.
Yeah.
Fast forward to the end of that week where the Bronco chase happened. I was at a gym, a Bally. Do they have Bally's Fitness out here in the East Coast?
I think there's a Bally's.
It was before 24-hour fitness, but that was my gym. I had a gym in Santa Monica on Bundy Drive.
Okay.
Which is the street where Nicole Brown Simpson lived. And while I was at the gym working out on the TV screens, we saw the chase going on. Ooh. And suddenly all of us at the gym hear all these helicopters overhead. And we walked outside because the chase ended up going right past us and heading right to his home in Brentwood, of course. So I was in the middle of that whole thing. And then the whole trial happened. Yeah. And it was I know how captivating it was for the country, for the world. You have no idea what it was like in L.A. during all of this. And, of course, it was right after the Rodney King riots that we had. And that was the underlying sort of subtext to the whole thing. And it brings us to that moment when the verdict was announced on live television as everybody watched. And I don't think anybody will forget that split screen of a white group of college students watching from USC, I think it was, and in another room, black college kids at UCLA. And all of the black college students celebrated when he was found not guilty. And it was just such a stark reality that we still have some major racial problems in this country that need to be figured out and worked out. Let's talk. So he died yesterday.
Yes.
And I want to get to the media reaction in a second, but let's. Well, you tell. First of all, I just gave my personal history here on it. As a 9-year-old, were you aware?
Well, I think I was at that point
impact
11, but no, absolutely not. My parents, though, talked a lot about it at the dinner table. And, we're an immigrant family, black immigrant family. So the racial issues in this country were foreign to us because we are from a predominantly black island. And actually, most black immigrants are racism. This idea is very foreign to them, for a lot of them, depending on where they're coming from. But my parents, the prevailing view was, okay, yeah, he probably did it. But people felt like this was the verdict was kind of saying to the system, no, it's not fair to treat a black man this way or black people this way. And finally, black people are the tables are turning, so to speak. I don't think my parents ascribed to that view. And I think
that was something that you heard in the black, or people heard it in the black community.
That's what people in the black community said, and frankly still say today. I actually just posted on X a photo, and there's a video of the audience reaction, Oprah Winfrey's audience, the day that the verdict was read, and it was mixed, probably intentionally mixed, but maybe not, of black women and white women. And when the verdict was read, almost all of the black women stood up and cheered, and the white women in the room, the confusion, the sadness on their faces. Some were covering their faces, crying,
right?
And that's indicative of the division between blacks and whites. And Rodney King was 91. That's what I was thinking of in 91. Rodney King beating was in 91.
The beating was 91, but the riots were 93. I want to say
something like that. So the tension has been high and was high. And to this day, you have people reacting like Mark Lamont Hill, former CNN guy, saying, yeah, we know he was guilty, but at the same time, it was about the system. Yeah. And that's why black folks, that's why they reacted the way they did.
But it wasn't about the system. And you don't solve the system through a jury trial for a murder. That setting is for justice for the individual crime. And by the way, let's not forget that the message was not just sent racially to America about what still needed to be fixed, but this was not a race issue. This was a domestic violence issue. This was a violence against women and violence specifically against a wife from an abusive husband. And the message was sent here, that's not as important. And that was a devastating moment for many of us who are take domestic abuse so importantly.
That's right.
In fact, Jamie, oh God, why am I blanking on her name? Fox News person. She used to be with Independent Women's Forum. Tammy Bruce.
Tammy Bruce.
Tammy Bruce was the chairwoman of the local Los Angeles National Organization of Women. She was liberal. She was friends with Nicole Brown Simpson's sister during that entire thing. Tammy Bruce, who is now a Fox News conservative, she started to see the light during the O.J. Simpson trial. I remember she had a weekend show on a talk radio station in Los Angeles, and I remember listening to her cover this and saying, what is going on? We're a society of laws. We're supposed to protect women in domestic violence situations, and we're throwing that out the window. It doesn't matter because of black grievance. And her liberal friends would say, listen, I agree with you, but I can't say anything about this. Because of the racial implications of this. It was such a defining moment for so many people. More about this, less a little bit of our own reflections, but we do want to give you how the media covered this, and also some reflections from Eric Shawn, who covered this case. He's going to be our guest later in this program, and he was talking on Fox yesterday about some of the things that they saw at the trial that they wouldn't show on television. The O.J. debate will never really be resolved in terms of why it happened, whether it was a good thing or bad thing. The only thing that is resolved at this point is he killed that woman. He killed that young man. He murdered them in cold blood. And the only way he should be described at any point in the future should be in that fashion.
Well, and let's not forget that his second trial, where he actually, where he was found guilty and served time, people say the same thing, that it was retribution. That it was him finally being caught, even if it wasn't for the same crime. In a civil way.
Where there is a different standard of evidence and a different standard of jury. It doesn't have to be a unanimous decision. It's not all of the various aspects. And then listen, I want our society to be that way. You throw the government throws you away for life in jail or executes you for a murder. The standard should be very high to get that guilty verdict. If they're taking your life savings away from you, it's going to have a different standard through a civil case. But let's also not forget, he literally wrote a book called "If I Did It."
Oh, it was disgusting.
All right, so a little bit more on this cultural moment, the death of O.J. Simpson, 76 years old due to cancer yesterday. It's 6:16. Let's get straight to Jamie Witt.
Traffic and weather brought to you by Hadid Carpet Cleaning.
WMAL, making sense of the vote because elections have consequences. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
I think the tragedy and the legacy of O.J. Simpson is actually the travesty and tragedy of justice that occurred with that not guilty verdict in 1995. I covered the O.J. Simpson trial, the criminal trial, and part of the civil trial later in which he was found liable. And it shows how in the American justice system, if you have enough money and you have lawyers who can take facts and twist them and add some reasonable doubt, according to some people, can basically free a savage, brutal murderer. What utterly convinces anyone of his guilt is what the American public did not see, what I saw, and that was the gruesome, horrendous autopsy photos of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And right now, my thoughts and my prayers and my heart are with the Goldman and its family, with the Goldmans of Ron's parents, his sister, and of course the sister and the family of Nicole Brown. Those photos were beyond revolting. It was a savage crime of passion and anger and rage and fury. Nicole's voice box was sliced. Her carotid arteries were severed. The knife went into her backbone. It was revolting and disgusting and showed how much it was a crime of passion. And if you followed the facts, the blood evidence, the blood drops that went back to his white Bronco, the blood cuts on his finger, the middle finger, 2 inches long, which were later shown to be from fingernails, probably in that frenzied fight with Nicole as he was slashing her to death. The Bronco that was parked at an odd angle at his house, the eyewitness testimony of the limousine driver who did not see it at first but then saw the Bronco later that revealed that O.J. drove from the murder scene up to there. That, to me, is the legacy of what the American public in our coverage we did not and could not show. And if any viewer of that trial at that time saw those autopsy photos, you would be shocked to your senses. And to me, at this moment, Harris, my thoughts are with the victims' families.
Yeah, that is Eric Shawn, who will be joining us later in the program as well to sort of reflect directly and answer our questions about this. But yeah, it was obviously a crime of passion. All of these ideas that there was a murderer on the loose in L.A. doing this. It's funny how there was never another crime that looked anything like this, and there was no other motive that anyone could come up with. Eric Shawn will join us at 7:05. How did the media cover this yesterday? Well, here's the Associated Press. Legendary athlete, actor, and millionaire. Oh, and millionaire. Legendary athlete, actor, and millionaire O.J. Simpson's murder trial lost him the American dream. It was the murder trial that lost him the
American dream.
Yeah.
I mean,
not the
goodness.
murder. Oh, that's okay. NPR did one better over on Threads, because I don't think NPR plays on X anymore, but Threads, which is basically Facebook's sort of left-wing version of Twitter. Here was the headline. Are you ready? NPR. We've been talking about NPR this week. How there's not one person in the newsroom who says, hey, maybe that's not the right take. Maybe there's a different... Here's the headline from NPR. Breaking news. The football great Orenthal James Simpson, known as OJ, has died.
The football great Orenthal J. Simpson. Oh, no.
That's it.
They it's weird what they left out.
Yeah.
You would think he was just like some other football great who's retired. I mean, come on now. Yeah. Even if they wanted to put a shine on a man who was pretty much 99% of America knows was a murderer.
Yeah, but
that you at least have to mention.
What do you think the headline for Donald Trump's death will be when NPR writes?
Raging racist authoritarian.
Donald J. Trump, 45th and 46th, 7th President of the United States. Yeah, no. Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Listen to Stephanie Elam on CNN talking about the verdict.
Yeah. And it's also just worth noting how much was impacted by this trial, Jake. So many things happened. We saw policing changing here in the city. And it's also worth noting, because of that unrest, that racial unrest in the 90s, that is why so many people who may not have been invested in O.J. Simpson were just happy to see that someone who was rich and famous and black could get away with what other people did in the system as well, too.
To get away with it.
She almost said to get away with it.
To get away with it. And then she stopped herself. And again, it's like, get away with what now? The brutal murder. And by the way, O.J. was the whitest black man you'll ever meet. Did you know when the jury was went on a little field trip. Oh God, I remember this trial so much, and I read all the books afterwards. These people, the jury went on a little field trip because they wanted to see the house, the mansion where they lived, and whether the glove was over the gate, and how he would have run behind Cato Kalin's little bungalow and all that stuff.
Yeah.
His house had pictures of him with all these white people on the walls. And the furniture was all Victorian-style European furniture. The whole place was redecorated for the jury visit. All of the pictures of O.J. with white celebrities and white women was taken off the wall. It was replaced with O.J. with black people. The Victorian European furniture was all taken out, and it was put in with like IKEA, basic, humble furniture. It was put in there. The second the lawyers walked in the house with the jurors, the district attorney said, "Objection, objection, objection." They started screaming. The mistakes that were made by that district attorney and the whole thing. And the fact that he then, presented himself as some hero and icon of Black America.
Oh, my goodness.
It was such a fraud.
Well, that is why, blacks are so torn. I mentioned, and let me read
What's
Mark
there to be
Hill.
torn about,
well,
though? That's what I don't understand.
I hear you, and I agree. They shouldn't be torn. But he this is what Mark Lamont Hill, he said. O.J. Simpson abandoned his community long before he killed 2 people in cold blood. So it's this idea that even if he abandoned people, married someone outside of his race, did not do anything to advance the racial justice cause through their eyes by supporting their organizations, he was still black and was still going to represent the idea that the system needed to change. And they would use his murder trial and acquittal as a sign that could be used to drive change. So that is why you still see black folks standing up and cheering for the acquittal, knowing that OJ very well did it.
Well, and that's why the people who are doing that and at the same time screaming "no justice, no peace" have no real concept of what justice truly is.
That's exactly right.
You can't celebrate
That's
injustice
exactly right.
and then demand justice.
That's exactly right.
And thank you for quoting Mark Lamont Hill, because I had just mentioned about O.J. being a fraud, and thank you. The adjective holds true for Mark Lamont Hill as well. Meanwhile, real fast, George Conway, because, Trump derangement syndrome knows no bounds. Here's George Conway yesterday.
O.J. went out and said that he's going to look for the real killers.
Killer. I mean, then wrote a book. If I did it. Trump. There's a little bit of Trump in him. Yeah.
A lot of Trump.
There you go.
Okay.
Can't talk about OJ without saying that he's just like Trump. 6:25 now, Patrice.
Now
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
6:37 now. We're plowing through this Friday news cycle. We could do another hour and a half on OJ, Patrice, I feel like.
Literally, I'm looking at pictures of Nicole Brown and just thinking, wow, like that's a battered wife.
Yep.
Was a battered wife, and we saw her end.
Yeah.
So awful.
But, the system was racist, so it had to be done, I guess. She was a sacrifice that needed to be made. Awful. Coming up at 7:05, Eric Shawn, who covered the OJ trial for Fox News, will join us. At 7:35, Diana Mayhew, National Cherry Blossom Festival. 8:05, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, campaigning in Virginia this weekend for Donald Trump. And then at 8:35, Brett Baer, Fox News Channel. That is Patrice Onwuka. I am Larry O'Connor. Happy Friday.
Yes.
Absolutely. Catherine Herridge did some great investigative reporting over at Fox News Channel. They parted ways. CBS News picked her up, which I thought was fantastic. And she continued to do great work at Fox News Channel as well. But apparently she flew a little too close to the sun for the corporate overlords over there at CBS News, because she was fired, laid off without any explanation. And more importantly, the corporate news entity, CBS News, locked her out of her office and confiscated all of her files and all of her records. Understand something. She was, you'll hear her testimony yesterday as she was testifying about the Press Act and why it's important to provide protections for reporters and their sources, which is, it's amazing that Democrats are against this, considering they live and die.
It's because of who she was investigating.
That's right. She was investigating corruption in this government, specifically the Biden administration, but also deep state issues that transcend who's sitting in the White House, that are a serious problem that we need to work on. And so, of course, the confiscation of her records, her files, her materials, that puts anonymous sources' lives at risk, frankly. And she was on Capitol Hill yesterday testifying to that effect.
I think my current situation can help put the importance of the Press Act into context. One of our children recently asked me if I would go to jail, if we would lose our house, and if we would lose our family savings to protect my reporting sources. I wanted to answer that in this United States, where we say we value democracy and the role of a vibrant and free press, that it was impossible, but I could not offer that assurance. The Bipartisan Press Act, which came out of this House committee, would put an end to the sort of legal jeopardy that I have experienced firsthand in the federal courts. And without the legislation, more journalists will run the uncertainty of the contempt gauntlet in the future. This legislation will provide protections for every working journalist in the United States, now and for the next generation. The legislation provides strong protections at the federal level for reporters and their sources. It would block litigants and federal government from prying into a reporter's files, except when there's an imminent threat of violence, including terrorism and in defamation cases. At the state level, similar rules are already in place to protect press freedom. It is my sincere hope that the passage of the Press Act will provide similar protections at the federal level. I hope that I am the last journalist who has to spend 2 years in the federal courts fighting to protect my confidential sources. My current situation arises from a Privacy Act lawsuit. I am only a witness in the case. It is not common for these cases to reach the stage of holding a reporter in contempt. But when such cases happen, they have profound consequences.
So again, great and sobering information from Catherine Herridge here,
Very
Patrice.
chilling.
I would love to play for you the reaction from Jim Acosta and Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitz and all the defenders of press freedom and the First Amendment that we heard, thumping their chest when they got upset that Donald Trump would tweet out a meme about CNN or leading a crowd and chanting CNN sucks because they saw that as an existential threat to press freedom. But they didn't have much to say about this, an actual threat to reporting and journalism from a real journalist.
Well, we've got echoes or foreshadowing of this kind of approach when under the Obama administration, press were targeted, where they had their file, where their idea of press freedom was undermined by an administration, a Democratic-leaning administration, and very little was said by the champions of the free exchange of ideas and of press and of the press. And so here you go again.
Yep.
You
Here
have
we go again.
one of their own is targeted by what should be a more mainstream news outlet, and she herself is left out to dry, and no one comes to her rescue because, again, protecting the Democrat in office.
I would only amend your statement by saying she is not one of their own because, see, she worked for Fox News.
Is that what it is?
And even when she was on CBS News, she wasn't on the same beat. She doesn't see them covering the exact same stories and writing the exact same article, carbon copy with the exact same sources. She has different sources, and she's getting different investigations that don't involve Jake Tapper just sitting there and waiting for a pal of his at the CIA to hand him a story that he doesn't actually have to do any reporting on.
Or a press release out of the White House.
That's right. So technically, she's not one of them, and I think that's also part of the issue here. More from Catherine Herridge yesterday.
Forcing a reporter to disclose confidential sources would have a crippling effect on investigative journalism, because without reliable assurances of confidentiality, sources will not come forward. The First Amendment provides protections for the press because an informed electorate is at the foundation of our democracy. If confidential sources are not protected, I fear investigative journalism is dead. Each day, I feel the weight of that responsibility. As you know, I was held in contempt of court for upholding the basic journalistic principle of maintaining the pledge of confidentiality to my sources.
Yeah. that this is what they want, though. They want investigative journalism to be dead, except for the investigative journalism that the state approves of, where they can use reporters, the media, and journalists as weapons against their political opponents, and it only works in one direction. Here's a moment where Jim Jordan was asking Catherine Herridge some questions about CBS News' conduct.
Wherever you work, if this happened to you, it's an attack on free press. It's an attack on the First Amendment. It makes it more challenging for reporters to work in the future. That disrupts the free flow of information to the public. They call it journalism a profession for a reason, because it's about an informed electorate, and it's a cornerstone of our democracy. I can only speak for myself. When my records were seized, I felt it was a journalistic rape.
Very, very strong words from Catherine Herridge, a great reporter, and I can't wait to see what she ends up doing next. Hey, Patrice, how about one more little exchange here from Catherine Herridge about
let's do it.
press freedom? This is her testimony yesterday for the Press Act. The Republicans are behind it. I'm curious why Democrats are against it.
All of big media seems to be captured by one side. You've worked for a sustained period of time for one of those networks. What of that? I mean, is that not true? It's not so much about your firing, your termination, whether it's because of Hunter Biden's story or whatever, but isn't that a problem? And how does a journalist who's independent and wants to call balls and strikes function in an environment where all the big media behemoths are captured by one side of the political spectrum?
Congressman, I've always tried to be respectful of my former employers. I worked at ABC News, I worked at Fox News, and I worked at CBS News, and I brought the same approach at every place that I worked, which is that it's about accountability journalism on the left and on the right, and representing diverse points of view. This is so important in a marketplace of ideas. It's so important in a civil debate to settle issues in this country. And I feel that the Press Act, in guaranteeing these protections to sources, helps grow the voices in journalism. That's the bottom line for me.
That's the bottom line for all of us.
Absolutely.
It should be.
So beautifully said, because she doesn't just limit it to the field of journalism, but how it has implications on our democracy and our society in a broad way.
Well, and
said.
especially in light of the NPR whistleblower earlier this week. And
that's right.
The mindset right now with our corporate-owned media. Or even worse, our government-funded media. It's 6:53.